Good morning. You've got a big one today, 23 videos from the last 25 hours. Topics range from a major AI paradigm shift debate and a government ban on frontier AI models to steam machines, electric utes, protein made from thin air, and everything in between. Grab a coffee, this one's going to take a while. Let's start with the biggest ongoing story in AI right now, because it touches almost everything else in today's briefing. Theo is genuinely upset in this video. He opens with "I need to crash out," and he's covering the government ban on Anthropic's Fable 5 and Mythos 5 models, now sitting at 11 days with no end in sight. He was live streaming Demos when these launched on June 9th, and was so impressed he was running two $200 a month plans simultaneously. The ban hit on June 12th, just 3 days later, and he initially assumed it would last a weekend. Here's how it all started. It wasn't initially about a jailbreak. It started with SK Telecom, a South Korean telecom company that had invested over $100 million into Anthropic, which was allegedly reselling access to Chinese customers who are banned from the models. Anthropic immediately cut SK Telecom off, which Theo emphasizes is a massive signal of compliance. They severed a relationship with a company that gave them over $100 million specifically to demonstrate good faith to the US government. It apparently wasn't enough. Then came a report from Amazon about a potential jailbreak. Theo reads directly from Anthropic's statement. The government provided only verbal evidence of a potential narrow, non-universal jailbreak. And what that jailbreak actually was is asking the model to read a code base and fix software flaws. Anthropic points out this capability is widely available from other models, including GPT-5.5. The conceptual problem Theo articulates is important here. A diff that patches a vulnerability also implicitly teaches how to exploit it, and a capable open-weight model handed that diff could reproduce the exploit. But here's the twist. Theo argues the best response is to use AI to find and patch exploits faster *, which is exactly what Anthropic was doing with Project Glasswing. To Anthropic, this was intended behavior. To the government, it was a jailbreak. The word has been rendered meaningless. The restriction itself isn't a formal ban on selling the model, it's a restriction on foreign nationals. Anyone who isn't a US citizen cannot use the models regardless of where they are. This includes, Theo implies, people like Andrej Karpathy. And here's why Anthropic can't just implement a simple auth wall. They expose models over API, so any developer who's integrated Fable into their product would now have to verify their own users are US citizens and forward that chain to Anthropic. That's not practically viable from a data privacy standpoint. Anthropologists eventually started sending employees to Washington in person. Trump told an interviewer he no longer sees Anthropic as a national security threat, and apparently considered, but stepped back from using the Defense Production Act, a wartime authority that could allow hostile government takeover of manufacturing operations, against Anthropic. But according to leaks, negotiations have now stalled because the government has lost interest, which paradoxically makes it harder to get the ban lifted. Anthropic is reportedly iterating on a cheaper Sonnet 5 era model just to give customers something to work with. On the legal front, a 43-page lawsuit has been filed against the United States, the Department of Commerce, Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick, Jeffrey Kessler of the Bureau of Industry and Security, and 10 additional defendants. The plaintiff is Legion, a US-based AI legal tech company whose Canadian development team lost access. The core legal argument: the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, IEEPA, explicitly prohibits the president from restricting the export of information and informational materials in any format. That's exactly what this directive does. Most legal analysts think the administration overstepped, but Theo's read is that negotiation will resolve this before courts act. On the chilling effect, other labs are scared. OpenAI people have been largely silent for weeks, and GPT-5.6 may be delayed until mid-July. A bipartisan congressional letter, Sam Liccardo, Jay Obernolt, Ted Lieu, and Scott Franklin, was sent to the Department of Commerce demanding transparency about the June 12th decision and requesting a response by June 26th. Theo says he'll cover that response. He also puts the capability context on the table. Fable 5 scored a 60 on Artificial Analysis Intelligence benchmarks, with Opus second at 56. GLM-5.2, the new open-weight Chinese model, is described as genuinely competitive with GPT-5.4 to 5.5. The first time Theo used an open-weight model without feeling like he was missing something. And that leads to what he calls the structural danger. The implicit government line now says models above a certain capability threshold face severe restrictions, while a model just below that line can be downloaded and run locally with zero restrictions. He puts it bluntly, he has model weights on his GPU, and the Department of Commerce is not getting them back. But the deeper fear is that the most capable accessible models will end up being Chinese government-censored open-weight models, and that is a genuinely bad outcome. He ends with a moment of sad resignation, saying software developers have never had to worry about their tools being taken away by government fiat, and that this is going to affect who wants to build in the United States. Directly connected to that ban story is Theo's other video, where he's doing something he says he hates, defending Anthropic. The subject is Claude Tag, Anthropic's new product that lets Claude join your Slack workspace as an actual team member, and more specifically, defending Andrej Karpathy's LinkedIn post calling it the third major redesign of LLM UI/UX. Theo sets up the joke himself. Knowing this is about a Slack integration makes Karpathy sound like he drank Anthropic Kool-Aid, but Theo commits to taking it seriously. Karpathy's three-paradigm framework goes like this. The first paradigm was the LLM as a website you visit. The second was an app you download. The third is a self-contained, persistent, asynchronous entity with org-wide tools and context that works alongside teams of humans. Claude Tag is Anthropic's implementation. Claude joins your Slack workspace, gets access to selected channels, connects to tools, data, and codebases, and anyone in a channel can delegate tasks. Claude builds context by following channels, can plan tasks for the future, and in ambient mode proactively surfaces relevant information. Theo flags two features as genuinely important. First, it's multiplayer in a way almost nothing else is. Within a channel, there's one Claude instance everyone interacts with, people can see what it's working on and pick up conversations where others left off. He contrasts this sharply with GitHub, which he dismisses as a fake multiplayer story, a bunch of really slow load times, and a website that crashes all the time. Second, and this is the more important insight, the channel is the context unit. Different channels get entirely different Claude experiences shaped by their history and granted tools. This maps naturally to how real organizations are already structured. Theo then gets genuinely excited describing his own setup. He runs a Hermes agent in a dedicated Discord server, and he spent significant effort solving the exact problem Claude Tag addresses. How do you give different agents different context and tools without spinning up entirely separate Docker containers for everything? His answer has been Discord threads. Each task lives in its own thread, preventing context pollution. He gives a specific example, a daily 11 a.m. job that scrapes the top posts from R-Programmer Humor, picks the 5 most relevant to his audience, and generates an HTML page with embedded images he can copy and post to Twitter. He set it up entirely through natural language, just told the agent what he wanted. It did a test run. He later asked it to format the output as HTML, and it updated itself. No terminal, no cron setup. Anthropic's own numbers. 65% of their product team's code is now created by their internal version of Claude Tag. Tagging Claude is described as one of the main ways we get things done at Anthropic. But here's Theo's core complaint, and he's not subtle about it. Claude Tag is Anthropic only. In his Hermes setup, he freely switches between models, GLM-5.2, GPT-5.5, various Claude models, even Fable, and routes different subtasks to whichever model is best for them. He noticed a dramatic quality improvement going from GPT-4.5 to 5.5 with the same agent configuration. He describes telling his Codex agent to call Claude for API design and UI work because those are areas where Claude outperforms. Claude Tag cannot do any of that routing. The choice, as he frames it, full model flexibility with all the setup pain of the Hermes Docker route, or Claude Tag which works out of the box but locks you into Anthropic. He ends by quoting Karpathy's response to critics, calling Claude Tag an org-level harness, not a crappy Slack bot, and agreeing fully. The AI Daily Brief also covered Claude Tag on the same day. And it's worth hearing Nathaniel's take, because he adds a layer of structured analysis and some really useful practitioner perspectives that complement what Theo said. Nathaniel opens by dismissing the congressional letter to Howard Lutnick as a nothing burger. Such letters rarely get substantive responses, and then covers the Legion lawsuit, which he frames similarly to Theo. Most legal analysts think the administration overstepped, but a clean judicial win is unlikely, and negotiation will resolve it first. On Claude Tag itself, Nathaniel reveals something that gave him extra confidence in its significance. Anthropic team members were personally texting him to make sure he covered it. He frames his 5 paradigm shifts analysis as his way of taking that seriously without drinking the Kool-Aid. The 5 shifts he walks through. First, from app-native interfaces to existing workplace interfaces, by embedding Claude Code capabilities into Slack rather than requiring a new app, Anthropic removes the friction of asking people to change where they work. He calls this inevitable in retrospect. Second, from private chatbot to shared teammate experience, AI moves from a personal tool to something the whole team builds on. Third, from single-user context to full team context, the agent gets ambient organizational knowledge without anyone having to reconstruct it. Fourth, from prompting to delegation, instead of telling AI what to do, you tell it what outcome you want. Fifth, from personal AI essentiality to organizational dependency, AI becomes infrastructure, not a power user tool. He then shares some remarkable practitioner accounts. Tobin South from Anthropic says Claude Tag now accounts for 90% or more of his work. He describes specific workflows like having Claude monitor a channel for feature requests or babysit a pull request, and he advises treating each Claude in each channel differently, introducing it with a pinned message that sets its context and persona. Tarek from the Claude Code team suggests creating a personal Claude channel, say, Tarek Claude, where you forward messages and Claude maintains a pinned status update using emoji-coded workflow tracking. Chris Taylor from Fractional describes Claude as functioning like a coworker that picks things up autonomously. It caught its own scheduling bug, fixed it, and wrote it up unprompted. It also built its own bug tracker when the team needed one and started autonomously filing new issues. On the challenges, Nathaniel was notably candid. Setup is not as simple as it sounds. Access, tool configuration, and permissions require careful thought. There's a human layer problem. Once Claude is in a shared channel, skeptics on the team may experience it as surveillance or as one person imposing their tool on everyone. Both good outputs, she's outsourcing her thinking, and bad outputs, see, this is what we worried about, will be interpreted as validation of the skeptic's position. And the multi-Claude reality, different Claudes with different permissions in different channels, is genuinely disorienting. Tobin himself noted users frequently tag Claude just to ask what it can do and what it remembers. Finally, Victor from Hugging Face raised the lock-in concern Theo also made. Building your own Slack agent lets you use any model, keeps data in your own infrastructure, makes every session auditable, and avoids vendor lock-in. Hugging Face's own internal agent is called Moonbot. For anyone setting up Claude Tag, Nathaniel's practical advice from Tarek is worth writing down. Introduce Claude to new channels with a pinned message, treat it like a Claude MD file, and have Claude maintain a pinned status update with emoji-coded workflow states. The other items from his headlines segment worth noting. XAI introduced a goals primitive in Grok Build, where users define an outcome and Grok works autonomously across multiple steps deploying subagents, using both Grok Build 0.1 and Cursor's Composer 2.5 following the XAI Cursor acquisition. ByteDance's CDance 2.5 was previewed with 30-second clips, 4K resolution, and support for up to 50 reference inputs. More on that in a moment. And a Congressional Select Committee flagged a Unitree humanoid robot listed on Amazon for $17,990 with 1-month delivery to Washington, noting Unitree has been designated a Chinese military company. Staying on the AI tools theme for a moment, Nate Jones from AI News and Strategy daily put out a video that's conceptually very aligned with what Theo and Nathaniel were describing with Claude Tag, but approached from a personal workflow angle. Nate introduces what he calls a loop of loops, and he opens with real energy. I haven't seen this covered well anywhere. The problem he's solving, AI still asks you to drive it. Most tools give you answers to prompts but dump the coordination, memory, and follow-up back on you. His hierarchy has 3 levels. A prompt is a single one-off request. It gives you one answer and stops. A loop is a recurring job with memory. The same situation keeps coming up, and it retains what happened before so you don't start from scratch. A loop of loops is when multiple individual loops can notice each other, share what changed, hand off context, and involve the human only when human judgment is actually required. He makes this concrete with a school trip packing example. The prompt version, "Make me a packing list," is fine, but you still had to notice the trip was coming, find the email, check the weather, assess whether the raincoat still fits, and repeat the entire process next month. That's the loop sitting on your shoulders. The loop of loops version does this. It detects the trip is coming, and that trigger wakes up 4 loops simultaneously: packing, weather, school schedule, and calendar conflict. The weather loop reports rain. The schedule loop finds pickup moved earlier. The calendar loop sees that conflicts with a meeting. The message loop drafts a text to the other parent, but stops before sending. You only get involved to approve the outgoing message. He makes a broader observation that I think is genuinely insightful. Apps have failed us not because they're bad individually, but because the loop doesn't live inside any one app. It lives between them, between email, the school portal, the grocery app, the calendar. For 20 years, we've been the connective tissue between all those tools. Agents are interesting precisely because they can sit across that gap. He shares his own setup: loops for Twitter, loops for understanding AI news, loops for deep research, loops for checking whether his reasoning is rigorous enough. His simplest example: every Monday, pull the top 50 AI tweets, organize by theme, come back next Monday. The loop of loops version adds a second loop that looks across both the Twitter loop and a Google News loop and synthesizes what matters today. He gives 4 design questions for any individual loop. What can it safely do on its own? What should it stop and ask you? What record should it leave? How does it get smarter next time? And a 5th question specifically for designing loop of loops. If this loop finds something, what other loop needs to know? If the trip loop finds rain, what wakes up? His safety caution is practical. Start your first loop of loops experiment with something tedious but low stakes. He gives a concrete starter: product use cases laddered into linear tickets, with another loop handling PRDs. And he's explicit: do not start with banking. He teases a Friday build video showing exactly how he constructed his own loop of loops, which sounds like required viewing if this concept resonates. On a related note, Emily Bach from Modern Software Engineering has a complementary perspective on all of this. She's coming at the same problem of AI quality control from the angle of a technical coach, and her concept of the agentic harness is worth understanding alongside Nate's loop framework. Emily is measured and practical throughout, and you can feel the frustration in her delivery when she describes how most developers are still using AI as glorified autocomplete. She herself turns off line completion entirely. She calls the random intrusive suggestions a distraction from deliberate writing. Her point is that if autocomplete is all you've tried, you haven't seen what AI can actually do. She credits Birgitta Berkeler with coining harness engineering and defines it as an environment you build to constrain an AI agent to produce consistently high-quality code. A harness has 2 components: guides and sensors. Guides are feed-forward, markdown files with design instructions fed to the agent before or during code generation. Sensors are feedback, deterministic scripts that examine code after it's written. She gives the example of a script that checks whether a file exceeds a line count limit or detects specific code smells algorithmically. She argues strongly against downloading a pre-built harness. Her reasoning: you won't understand what's in it, you'll be afraid to change it, and it won't be tailored to your codebase. Build your own, starting with unit tests. Pick a poorly designed test, work with the agent through multiple rounds to improve it, agree on the principles, then capture those principles in a markdown guide. That guide becomes part of the harness. Over time, prompting gets easier because the harness accumulates the team's standards, and the codebase has more good examples to copy. The flywheel effect is where she gets genuinely excited. Without a harness, agents copy the patterns already present in the codebase. In legacy code with poor design, this means more poor design. With a harness, you interrupt that loop. Better code informs a better harness, which produces better code. She calls this huge and says it gives her real hope for legacy code bases because design can genuinely improve over time rather than degrade, deferring, or eliminating risky Big Bang rewrites. On maintenance, she's clear that harness removal is as normal as harness addition. Guides tend to bloat as advice accumulates, but as the codebase and models improve, less explicit guidance is needed. Long guides are expensive in tokens and may not be helping anymore. Her practical approach for most teams: make harness updates a standard part of every task, add and remove freely, and use spot checks. Running the same prompt with and without a proposed change on a branch when you want to validate a specific update. She closes by framing this as proprietary team knowledge, owned by the team the same way shared build scripts are. Now let's talk about AI video, because there were a couple of videos on this, and the ByteDance Seedance 2.5 story is legitimately significant. Gavin and Kevin from AI for Humans are in their usual loose co-host banter mode, but Gavin is genuinely excited about this one. Seedance 2.5 doubles the maximum clip length from 15 to 30 seconds, adds 4K resolution output, and supports up to 50 pieces of reference material, images of characters, costumes, specific scene elements, all stitched into that 30-second clip. Gavin estimates 30 seconds equals roughly 15 to 20 usable shots, which is a substantial output for AI filmmakers or, as Kevin Riley noted, for slop farmers. The 4K upgrade in the current Seedance 2 is already available, but API only and very expensive. Gavin showed a side-by-side comparison of the same prompt run through Omni Flash versus Seedance 2, demonstrating the quality advantage clearly. Gavin makes an important structural point about why Chinese video models are ahead. They operate with fewer restrictions on training data. When Seedance 2 first launched without guardrails, it was generating videos of Brad Pitt and Tom Cruise without hesitation. He argues this permissive data environment directly enables superior model quality. He also has a Hollywood-focused proposal. Studios should collectively pool their content into a shared dataset, license it to AI companies for a percentage of revenue, and carve out a portion for the unions. A way to monetize the back catalog rather than just be victimized by AI. On the American AI slowdown, Claude Fable 5 is still absent. Prediction markets say it won't arrive before end of June, and Gavin jokingly invokes the Kaiser-Soze effect. Maybe it just never arrives. GPT-5.6 and Gemini 3.5 Pro are both reportedly delayed. He floats two explanations. Either the models aren't yet at Fable-level quality and labs don't want to release something underwhelming, or there's some kind of informal coordination. He references a meeting between Dario Anthropic, Sam Altman, and Demis Hassabis at the G7 summit as possible evidence. Acknowledging this is a conspiracy theory. There's a brief but notable segment on a leaked audio demo of BD1, OpenAI's rumored bidirectional audio model. Features demonstrated: singing, sound effects, full duplex operation meaning it can react and interject while you're still speaking, and some reasoning capability. In the demo, it improvised an 8-bar rap about Gavin driving a minivan after soccer pickup. Gavin speculated BD1 was intended to launch alongside GPT-5.6 and may also be delayed. The data center discussion is where Gavin gets more serious. They played a viral clip of Theo Von ranting against data centers, worrying about water, energy, and generally calling the people behind them kind of evil. Kevin acknowledged some legitimate local grievances. Communities often don't get input on data center deals, and real issues like water and energy consumption exist. He specifically cited Elon Musk's Colossus data center polluting a neighborhood as a case warranting accountability. But Gavin flagged an OpenAI published report claiming China is behind some of the data center backlash in America, using social media and astroturfing to slow American AI infrastructure. Kevin called this a crushingly sad side effect of platforms that have never policed bots. John Carmack was quoted saying he's considering buying a billboard saying, "Data centers are awesome. Texas should lead," which feels like a reasonable response. Finally, Gavin described using Claude with MCP to build a survey inside his Beehive newsletter platform. 20 minutes of back and forth with Claude acting autonomously, producing a fully functional survey. Results showed his audience is roughly split 50-50 between wanting quick news roundups and deeper analytical dives. Kevin also mentioned he built a personal language learning app using Codex and Claude Code, called the Speed from Concept to Phone Insane, and teased a full walkthrough on a future Thursday episode. On the practical AI video tooling side, Jamie from Teachers Tech put out a sponsored but genuinely useful step-by-step tutorial on Seedance 2 in 4K via the Higgsfield browser platform. He opens with a mountain biking sequence generated from a single text prompt and is upfront. The video is sponsored by Higgsfield, but he's skipping the hype and focusing on workflow mechanics. He insists on learning the interface parameters before writing any prompts to avoid wasting generation credits. Key details: the model dropdown must be explicitly set to Seedance 2, not left on a default. Resolution options go up to 4K, which Jamie emphasizes is a native render, not a post-process upscale. Duration runs from 4 to 15 seconds. He recommends a minimum of 12 seconds for cinematic work because it gives the physics engine enough runway. Set bitrate to high, not normal, to preserve fidelity in moving textures like dust, water, and fabric. His core methodology is a 5-part prompt hierarchy: subject and action first, then camera language, then style and environment, then specific 4K texture and audio details, and finally constraints placed at the end to prevent unwanted elements like background morphing or stock aesthetic looks. He deconstructs the mountain biking prompt as an example. The camera section alone specifies a cinematic tracking shot from behind, then a low side angle on a jump, with an anamorphic lens and shallow depth of field. The key physics insight: use language like suspension compresses and body shifts weight to engage Seedance's native weight distribution tracking, otherwise you get rubbery limb movement. For prompt generation, he recommends using any AI chatbot. He uses Claude as an assistant director. Give it your concept and instruct it to apply the 5-part formula within the 2,500 character limit. He demonstrated this live. The resulting prompt was fully structured and copy-paste ready. For advanced workflow, he demonstrated connecting Claude Desktop to Higgsfield via MCP, which eliminates manual parameter configuration entirely. You type natural language instructions, use the video generator tool to create a 4K scene, set duration to 12 seconds, force bitrate to high, and Claude configures the exact parameter payload automatically. When the output had movement issues, he told Claude in chat to fix the camera angle, and it iterated instantly. This upgrades Claude from writing assistant to active production assistant. He also demonstrated character consistency using Higgsfield's element system. Tag yourself or any character with @ and reference them in prompts, and the same face, hair, and clothing persist across shots. He applied this to a fictional small business product video for Basecamp Brew Company's Ridgeline Espresso blend, a practical demonstration that the same tool producing extreme action shots can generate commercially usable social media content. His honest 4K resource advice: never draft in 4K, test and iterate at 720p or with the fast model. Only commit to 4K with high bitrate for the final production asset, since render time and credit cost are significantly higher. Since GLM 5.2 has come up in multiple other videos today as a benchmark reference point, it's worth going through the detailed hands-on review from the How I AI channel. The presenter is enthusiastic and owns his AI bro identity, but his analysis is grounded and his frustrations are real. GLM 5.2, General Language Model 5.2, is made by ZAI, a Beijing-based startup. It's open weight, meaning you can download the weights, run it on your own hardware, fine-tune it on your own data, and avoid vendor lock-in. Context window is 1 million tokens. Text in, text out only, no image input or output, which is a noted limitation. It supports reasoning mode, streaming, function calling, context caching, structured output, and MCP. On benchmarks, Frontier SWE, Post-Train Bench, and SWE Marathon all position it near or above GPT-5.5. On SWE Bench Pro, it's roughly on par with GPT-5.5 and close to Claude Opus 4.8, beating Gemini 3.1 Pro. He characterizes this as in their arena. For setup via OpenRouter, since he can't run it locally on his laptop, there's a critical undocumented detail for Cursor users. The base URL must be OpenRouter, AI/API/v1/cursor with the cursor suffix. He says it took him 30 minutes to find that. For Claude Code, you edit your shell profile to add your API key, the base URL without the cursor suffix, and clear the default Anthropic auth token, then set the model field in Claude/settings. JSON. Test 1, Codebase Exploration on his ChatPRD project. GLM correctly identified the stack, Next, JS, full stack, integrations, and recently shipped work including Chat v2 stability, billing features, and security work. Fast and accurate. Test 2, he asked it to convert that understanding into a visual HTML page. The color scheme was not ugly, blurple, and it correctly identified nearly 3,500 merged PRs, the product pillars, and suggested a roadmap that matched the actual internal one. Most impressively, it used ChatPRD pink as the accent color without being told. He contrasted this with GPT's tendency toward ugly green navy and Claude's tendency toward Claude orange. Test 3, a marketing page hero redesign. FirstPass produced a redesigned hero with AI workflows as a stronger CTA with hover effects, episode count metadata, and podcast buttons. He found the buttons too bright and wide, gave specific feedback, and the model iterated to a more subtle black button design. Verdict: not slop, good enough to put in rotation for design work. Test 4, and the most ambitious. A 30 to 45-minute long-running agentic task where GLM pulled the last 72 hours of Sentry errors and Vercel logs, built a prioritized bug fix plan, and attempted to ship fixes. The major stumbling block was repeated struggles with TypeScript and React. He was visibly frustrated and worried this was a deal-breaker since React is 98% of his actual work. But it eventually compiled, and the final output was an HTML canvas showing 20 Sentry errors, 5 Vercel signals, 14 planned fixes, and 2 P0 issues he hadn't noticed in his own Sentry monitoring. He was genuinely impressed by the final quality despite the rocky middle. Total cost for all testing: $3.36 for approximately 6 million tokens at a 72% cash rate. He calls this a steal compared to equivalent Opus or GPT-5.5 usage. Let's move to the broader job market picture, because Stefan Mischuk had 2 videos on tech layoffs that are worth pairing together. Starting with Oracle. The headline is that Oracle cut 21,000 jobs, 13% of their workforce, over the fiscal year ending May 31, 2026, with management explicitly linking the cuts in part to AI. Stefan's opening move is to flag that the annual filing number is the one to trust, legally required to be accurate, and that earlier analyst projections of 20,000 to 30,000 cuts should be taken with a grain of salt. But Stefan's main argument is that restructuring is the key word in Oracle's announcement, and the layoffs are not purely an AI story. He walks through a LinkedIn thread to structure his analysis, and the framework he endorses most strongly comes from a comment that separates 3 distinct forces: traditional cost-cutting, AI-enabled productivity gains, and capital redeployment into AI infrastructure. The real analytical questions are whether AI actually changed workflow economics, reduced costs structurally, improved margins durably, and whether the AI infrastructure spend will earn an adequate return. One comment notes Oracle cut 21,000 roles while simultaneously spending $656 billion on AI infrastructure, with cash flow $268 billion negative. That's a payroll cut to fund a capital bet, not primarily AI doing the jobs. Stefan does push back on the AI is a scapegoat framing. He says Oracle has better internal data than outside observers, and draws on personal experience repeatedly watching companies lay off workers skilled in old technologies and ramp up hiring for new ones. He acknowledges employees sometimes resist learning new tools, which creates its own cultural dynamic. Some data points he surfaces. MIT found 86% of companies got zero measurable return on 30 to 40 billion in AI spending, with failure traced to removing human oversight. Klarna replaced 700 customer service agents. Quality collapsed. The CEO admitted they went too far, and they rehired. PwC analyzed job postings across 27 countries and found that firms pulling ahead use AI to amplify employees, not replace them. Stefan's personal estimate. Roughly 5% of the Oracle layoffs are genuinely AI-related, though he explicitly hedges, "I'm just guessing." His larger point is that this moment is the greatest opportunity for developers since the beginning of the dot-com era, but that doesn't mean it's a bubble-free era. Many AI companies will fail and disappear, just as GeoCities and Netscape didn't survive the wave they were part of. His direct advice: master fundamentals, design patterns, refactoring, system-level design, request response, the stateless nature of the web, CRUD, but learn all of it alongside AI tools. Stefan's second video is about Meta's layoffs, and he's even more direct about challenging the AI narrative. His opening move. The common story is that AI forced Zuckerberg to cut 10% of Meta's workforce. He calls this a fugue. His actual explanation is simpler and more damning. Meta spent somewhere around $80 billion on the metaverse failed, and the company had to retool. Developers within Meta, who already understood AI, were likely repositioned into new roles rather than let go. From there, Stefan pivots to the lesson he really wants to drive home, which is the heart of the video. He has been coding professionally since approximately 1994-1995 and has watched multiple technology stacks rise and fall. Perl CGI, VB5 and VB6, Flash ActionScript. The Web Standards Movement and CSS as a serious discipline emerged around 2002-2003, transforming what web development meant in just a few years. He draws a direct parallel to today, saying mastery of React or data structures and algorithms is similarly becoming outdated, and people who think those skills are their primary ticket to employment should get a typewriter. He shares a personal story. A friend who was a successful webmaster stepped away from the industry in 1998, came back in 2003, and told Stefan he felt like he was learning from scratch. Stefan uses this to illustrate both the pace of change and its survivability. His friend wasn't truly starting from scratch because strong fundamentals let you pick up new technologies much faster. His rule of thumb: the first programming language takes the longest to learn, the second takes maybe 10–20% of that time, and by the third you can pick it up in days. On the AI stack specifically, he's emphatic that the right skills are not just using ChatGPT or Claude. The full AI stack requires understanding local models versus cloud models, AI harnessing and endpoints, prompting, looping, agents, deploying agents, and managing agents properly. Combined with core software fundamentals, port numbers, client versus server rendering, SQL versus NoSQL, design patterns, system design architecture, these are what make someone genuinely effective with AI tools rather than a surface-level user. He closes with his signature pragmatism. Stay nimble, don't panic when companies fail or people get laid off, keep looking forward. The Serious CTO had a video that pairs well with Stefan's framing, going deeper on the decision-making layer of software development. The presenter is sardonic and direct throughout, clearly someone who has watched this pattern repeat across many organizations and is mildly exasperated by it. His central argument: most developers are technically competent but consistently fail at the prior question: what should actually receive engineering effort? He calls this the impact paradox. Engineering output can increase while actual progress stagnates. Teams ship more, add more services and abstractions and dashboards, and 6 months later nobody uses the feature. The team is drowning in maintenance, and everyone is confused because the metrics looked good. He calls out what he describes as a comforting fairy tale, that following best practices, using modern architecture, and moving fast will produce business results. He rejects this flatly. Most software failures, he argues, are not technical failures but alignment failures. Teams confuse output with outcomes, measure velocity instead of value, and use architecture as proof of serious engineering, which he calls architecture theater. Microservices get called out explicitly. Sometimes they help, but often they convert one understandable problem into 10 services, 10 databases, 10 deployment pipelines, and 10 places for bugs to hide, the debugging tax. The statistics he cites are sobering. The Standish Group Chaos Report finds roughly 80% of software features are rarely or never used, and 12% of features generate the majority of daily usage. He describes unused features as dead code with a pension plan, still requiring maintenance, adding cognitive load, creating dependencies. Cloud and SaaS waste runs approximately $29.5 billion per year for publicly traded companies. Individual features cost $50,000 to $500,000 to build, and the opportunity cost of building the wrong thing is 3 to 5 times the direct cost. He identifies resume-driven development as a structural cause. The market rewards certain technology choices on LinkedIn, so developers gravitate toward tools that look impressive. He explicitly says this doesn't make developers bad people. It means incentives work. His complexity budget concept is one of the more useful framings in the video. Every project has a finite tolerance for complexity. Spend it on Rust, Kubernetes, vector databases, and a new front-end stack before the core business logic works, and project risk explodes. He calls choosing boring technology, PostgreSQL, Django, a modular monolith, the senior engineering move. Spend complexity where it actually moves the needle. On AI making this worse. When implementation gets faster and cheaper, teams can ship even more poorly considered functionality. If the goal is wrong, AI helps reach the wrong destination faster. You just automated the mistake. His 3-level prescriptive framework. At the code level, build the smallest functional thing that proves whether the problem is real. At the architecture level, design for change. A modular monolith is often the right starting point. Letting you split on real domain seems discovered later rather than imaginary ones drawn on a whiteboard. At the product level, become product-minded. Ask why, push for discovery before delivery, use North Star metrics and product kata thinking. He gives 3 specific questions engineers should ask when someone requests a feature. What problem does this solve? How will we know it worked? What does this cost if we're wrong? He says the third question is where senior engineers earn their compensation. There's a story about Google that Maximilian Schwarzmuller covered that illustrates some of these organizational dysfunction themes perfectly. Maximilian leads with the framing that this isn't about the high-profile AI researcher departures that reportedly caused a 5% stock drop. It's about a more niche developer story he finds personally interesting. Justin Pernell, a Google employee most people hadn't heard of, was fired 2 months ago for creating the Google Workspace CLI, a command-line interface to interact with Google Drive, Gmail, Calendar, Sheets, Docs, and more. Maximilian is immediately logical about why this tool made sense. Individual humans might not use a CLI for these services, but AI agents would, because LLMs are highly effective at operating well-documented command-line tools. He draws a direct parallel to the unofficial GOG CLI created by Peter Steinberger, specifically so OpenClaw agents could interact with Google services. Here's the wrinkle. The repository lived under an official Google Workspace GitHub account, but the README explicitly stated it was not an officially supported Google product. So the account was official, the repository was not. Despite this disclaimer, the tool went viral, #1 on Hacker News, thousands of GitHub stars, many thousands of users in just days. Why fire someone who built something people clearly wanted? Maximilian reads through a long Hacker News thread of claimed ex-Googlers and identifies multiple layers. First, there's a process argument. Releasing public repos required legal sign-off that Justin apparently skipped, though he himself said his team regularly created open-source layers over APIs without proper sign-off and nobody cared until this one blew up. So the question is why Google cared this time. Maximilian's answer: politics. First, Google apparently had or was building an official CLI or related tooling. He found something called Google Workspace Developer Tools with a Gemini CLI extension. A rogue popular release would embarrass and undermine that internal team. Second, and this is the more cutting observation, Google suffers from severe internal team fragmentation. A team building the Gemini integration for Google Docs would not want a CLI that lets agents use Docs without users ever opening the app, because their success metrics depend on human engagement with the app and the AI features inside it. The CLI threatens those internal numbers. Adi Osmani, a 14-year Google veteran and well-known developer community figure, also departed around the same time, with standard LinkedIn time to move on language. Maximilian speculates Osmani may have been nudged out given that he had publicly promoted the CLI on X when it launched. On Google's broader AI position, Maximilian says he knows no developer who uses Gemini models for coding. OpenAI, Anthropic, and GLM-5 all outperform Gemini for coding tasks. His real concern is the self-improving AI loop. Models good at coding help accelerate development of the next model. If Google's models lag on agentic and coding tasks, they could fall behind in this self-accelerating spiral. He wraps by noting the absurdity of the situation. Google had a chance to look cool, attract talent, and engage with the early adopter AI agent community, and instead made an enemy of it through internal politics. Shifting completely now to a really fascinating GOTO 2025 conference talk. Ken Pfeuffer, an HCI researcher, gave a talk on the evolution of user interfaces that's worth your time even if you're not in the hardware or research space. He has the energy of someone who spent a decade working on something nobody believed in and is now watching it finally arrive. His framing device is a personal video of himself assembling a bed frame. He observes, when inserting a tile, he looks first at the target location where precision is needed, not at his hand. The hand moves toward where the eyes already landed. This is the biological baseline for everything that follows: gaze directs, hand executes. He traces interface history from there. 2 million years of hand tool evolution led to highly optimized physical manipulation. Digital interfaces, keyboards, mice, styluses are all hand-optimized, with eyes purely passive. Then he plays Steve Jobs' 2007 iPhone keynote dismissing styluses and Ballmer's response dismissing the iPhone at $500 as too expensive and lacking a keyboard. Pfeuffer uses this contrast as a lesson. Legacy thinking tries to carry over the old paradigm, while the right move is to reimagine the interaction for the new context. Apple won the mobile war. For VR, the equivalent question has been, what is the fundamental interaction model, the way multi-touch was for mobile? 3 approaches existed before gaze input. Direct gestures limited to near range, head-based ray pointing causes head fatigue, and hand-based ray pointing causes hand fatigue. None were satisfying for broad consumer use. In 2024, the shift arrived. Eyes plus pinch, now announced or implemented by Apple, Meta, and Google. Pfeuffer traces gaze interaction research back to 1981 and Richard Bolt at MIT, known for Put That There. A year later, Bolt built a system where a user could look at one of several screens to make it active while using a joystick for explicit commands. Bolt already understood in the 1980s that gaze alone is ambiguous. You need a secondary explicit input to confirm intent. That's the seed of everything. When Pfeuffer started his PhD in 2013, gaze research was in a drought. Doubts about accuracy, perception that it's unnatural, concerns about fatigue, loss of community belief. He recognized both the risk and the opportunity. He built approximately 100 prototype variations, exploring how multi-touch fingers could be mapped to gaze position on a 2D touchscreen. Key DMOS, pinch zoom, where gaze continuously redirects the zoom center, allowing off-center pinching that keeps the view unoccluded. Stylus plus gaze, where the drawing mode switches contextually based on whether you're looking at the canvas or the menu. Browser on tablet, where gaze predicts intent and small thumb gestures confirm actions. Moving to 3D in 2016 with HTC Vive, Leap Motion, and integrated eye tracking, he extended the paradigm. Among all hand gestures, pinch is the simplest and most reliably trackable. He describes a direct-indirect gesture model, direct gestures for nearby objects, gaze-directed indirect gestures for distant objects. So you look at something far away and reach for it, and it comes to your hand. All of this was published with no industry impact. Then, in 2023-2024, Apple shipped Gaze Pinch in the Vision Pro and described the interaction model in their UI guidelines. His university wrote an article. He broke a decade of Twitter silence. He frames this as the validation he needed. His current work explores next-generation extensions. Look and drop extends drag and drop. Gaze controls lateral movement, the hand only controls depth. User studies showed no speed improvement, but significantly reduced fatigue and physical effort. His closing argument: eye tracking has historically been for accessibility. The shift is from hand-only interfaces to combined eye and hand interfaces across all contexts. Any situation where hands are currently used should be reconsidered. Would Gaze make this interaction simpler? On the hardware side of things, Max Tech covered the leaked iPad roadmap, and it's quite a comprehensive set of updates coming across all 4 iPad lines over the next couple of years. The presenter was genuinely excited, particularly about the iPad mini redesign and OLED coming to the Air. Starting with the iPad 12, expected in September 2025, tied to the iOS 27 launch and new Siri rollout. Code leaks confirm the A18 chip and 8 GB of RAM, up from 6 GB. That RAM bump is what enables full Apple Intelligence support. Pricing hope is $349, but a memory crisis could push it to $400. The presenter personally vouches for the new Siri from beta testing, calling it better than anyone ever expected. The iPad mini 7th generation is getting a full ground-up redesign. New curves, redesigned edges, and elimination of traditional speaker grills in favor of vibration-based speaker technology, which the presenter calls insane, but notes enables better water resistance. Most significantly, it becomes the first non-Pro iPad to get OLED, replacing an LCD he describes as quite terrible with gray blacks and poor contrast. Caveats: not tandem OLED, so brightness caps around 500-600 nits, and no ProMotion 120Hz because the LTPS panel doesn't support variable refresh rate. The chip jumps dramatically from A17 Pro to A19 Pro with 12 GB of RAM, a 50% increase, enabling the best 20 billion parameter on-device Apple Intelligence model, same as iPhone 17 Pro. Also gets the N1 wireless chip for Wi-Fi 7 and Bluetooth 6. Expected September or October 2025, likely about $100 more than current pricing. The iPad Air M5 is targeted for early 2027, also getting OLED same technology as the Mini, with the 13-inch model expected to be especially impressive. Still no ProMotion. RAM is 12 GB on lower storage tiers, 16 GB on higher. Thinner bezels, possible curved redesign, likely $700 starting, possibly offset by 512 GB as base storage. The iPad Pro M6 is also expected in early 2027. Display stays tandem OLED since it was recently introduced. The M6 chip is expected to incorporate AI accelerators in the GPU, and for the first time in years, a possible CPU core increase from 10 to 12 cores. A vapor chamber cooling system is rumored to handle the thermal load, a first for any iPad. Standard RAM bumping to 16 GB with 32 GB potentially available. Also likely gets the N2 wireless chip and C2X cellular modem. Price could rise to $1,100. The presenter's active recommendation: buy the current M5 iPad Pro at $100 off during Prime Day, versus a $100 price increase on the M6, you'd effectively save $200. Time for something completely different. Linus from Linus Tech Tips worked a real 8-hour shift at IKYPC, a custom PC shop in a Taipei tech mall, and it's genuinely entertaining. The premise builds on 2 prior years of Taipei tech mall videos. Year 1, Linus bought a $5,000 PC undercover and gave it away. Year 2, 3 shops competed to build the best $12,000 PC. This year, he actually works a shift, 1 p.m. to 9 p.m., and is immediately handed a water-cooled GPU block installation job. He notes this was clearly not going to be an easy start. The hidden production layer is what makes this funny. His crew secretly places a rush order for a giveaway PC that must be completed that day, and Linus has no idea that one of the customers is effectively himself. The narrator periodically breaks the fourth wall to update viewers on that subplot, while Linus thinks he's just working a normal shift. The real jobs he handles are genuinely interesting from a troubleshooting perspective. A ROG system won't post. Linus finds the 24-pin ATX power connector isn't plugged in. The machine has about $250 worth of Noctua fans, but basic assembly errors. After adding a new power supply, it still won't boot, leading him to conclude the motherboard is dead, probably an ASUS RMA situation. Another system is running at 5600 MT/SCL46. Linus calls this way too slow, and slow-ass memory, even with Expo apparently enabled, with CPU pinned at 99%. He flashes the BIOS, and afterward it runs above 4 GHz as expected. He says he could not explain why it was in that state, just updating the BIOS fixed it. A third walk-in for cable management reveals a radiator installed on the wrong side, 2 different RGB controller hubs, protected film still on the motherboard, and during disassembly, one of 8 screws snaps off inside the standoff. Linus improvises, encounters a screw thread incompatibility between M3 radiator holes and 632 thread fan screws, and force threads them, coining the line, "Any screw is a self-tapper if you try hard enough." The giveaway subplot is where the video gets chaotic. By 3 p.m., the crew is nervous because Linus hasn't started building their secretly commissioned PC. They recruit a Mandarin-speaking local fan named Caleb to communicate the special order to the boss. But the boss misunderstands and starts building it himself. The crew sends a spy to clarify. This nearly blows the cover when the boss keeps switching to English, drawing Linus's attention. The crew's final gambit, writing a physical note, delivered during the 2 minutes Linus goes to the bathroom. The crisis is resolved, and Linus is assigned to complete the giveaway PC, an AIO-cooled build, without knowing it's the one being given away. The reveal the next day. They find a student near the mall who wins an RTX 5070, Intel Core Ultra 270K+, AIO water cooling, 32 GB of RAM, Wi-Fi 7 card system, built by Linus himself. The boss notes at the end that rising RAM and SSD prices mean this might be his last year operating at the mall, which lands with a genuinely bittersweet note. Staying in the hardware space, Bellular News covered the Steam Machine launch, and the story is simultaneously disappointing and quietly optimistic, depending on how you look at it. The presenter opens by noting that Steam machines have arrived, but Valve's own FAQ explicitly states their original price goal is no longer viable. This is crushing for Valve because this was the centerpiece of a new hardware line and a second attempt at hardware ambitions that failed over 10 years ago with the original Steam machines. Pricing, 2 models, 512 GB for £879 or $1,049 USD, and 2 TB for $1,349 USD. The controller is $79 and can be bundled to save $20, which the presenter dryly notes is about the best deal you can possibly get here. You can't even just buy one, you have to join an interest list by June 25th, then get placed in a random queue. Valve's explanation for the price. They began sourcing parts in 2023, expecting costs to fall. The AI data center build-out changed everything. At times, Valve says they couldn't source some of our components at all, at any price. This also caused compromises including single-channel memory instead of dual-channel in some units, which the presenter calls really not ideal. Valve's original internal target was closer to $750, and the presenter says that's probably close to what the machine is actually worth. The important conceptual point Valve makes: this is a PC, not a console. Because it runs SteamOS on standard PC hardware, they can't do loss leader pricing the way Sony or Microsoft can. If they sold it cheaply, businesses and non-gaming buyers would buy them in bulk. Performance sits roughly on par with a base PS5 at launch. Digital Foundry found hitting consistent 1440p60 requires manual settings adjustment. Linus Tech Tips found the base PS5 sometimes outperforms it. The 4K 60 claim on Valve's store page requires heavy frame generation, and the presenter says flatly it really shouldn't be on their store page. The supply chain segment is grimly illuminating. Valve's hardware team described their memory supplier relationship to Gamers Nexus. There's no contracts, there's nothing. Those guys give us a price every month and they say you can buy that many and it's yes or no. MSI's Andy Chu on trying to reduce memory costs. I would say, yes, it will be a tough year for us and for the gamers. Tim Cook told the Wall Street Journal he has never seen anything like it in any area in over 40 years, calling the situation unsustainable. If it's this hard for Apple, it's far worse for Valve. But the real story, as the presenter explicitly flags it, is a quiet line at the end of Valve's FAQ. SteamOS 3.8 is now available for any living room PC using whatever AMD GPU the user already has. Quote from the FAQ, "Right now, only AMD GPUs are supported, but we're working on expanding support for the future." The presenter argues this is the actual important development. The Steam machine becomes reference hardware for SteamOS, and SteamOS itself becomes freely available at broad scale. SteamOS can deliver better performance than Windows on the same hardware in many cases, and a fixed hardware target pushes developers to optimize. Even people who can't access a Steam machine benefit from Valve doing this. Lunjuk covered Xlibra, a fork of Zorg, releasing version 25.2 with 976 commits, and he is fired up about it. The adversarial context he establishes first: Red Hat employees, Free Desktop Org, the Wayland development team, and GNOME leadership all opposed Xlibra. His accusations are pointed. Red Hat and Free Desktop banned and silenced Xlibra developers. GNOME leadership, the same people writing official GNOME press releases, vandalized Xlibra wiki pages, and labeled Xlibra developers Nazis. Lunjuk emphasizes this wasn't fringe behavior from random community members, but came from actual project leadership. The 25.2.0 beta was released June 21st. He uses a visual comparison to make his point. Zorg commits over the past year would be a tiny bar, Xlibra's 976 commits a massive one. The release contents include new NVIDIA support and related overhauls, bug fixes, new hardware support including Coreboot DRM, VESA DRM, and EFI DRM drivers, Intel DDX restricted to pre-Gen 3 hardware, infrastructure improvements, fully automated packaging for many Linux distributions, and more robust CI infrastructure. Lunjuk frames this as a vindication of merit-based development over political gatekeeping. Despite the coordinated effort to kill Xlibra, including pressure on Linux distributions not to adopt it, Xlibra adoption is growing, and he calls it quickly becoming the future of X servers on Linux and BSD distributions. He singles out the GNOME Foundation specifically, saying no one is listening to them anymore. His characterization of the Xlibra developers: simply making software on merit, unconcerned with others' politics or social media statements. He closes with an extended subscriber pitch around his retrocomputer-themed subscriber walls. Current active walls include Ubuntu 4.1, the first Ubuntu release, filling fast and expected full by end of June, Commodore 64 about 2/3 full, unlikely to survive the weekend by the time of recording, and BOSR 5 about halfway full. Past completed walls: Palm OS, Amiga OS, Temple OS. He frames putting your name on the wall as a political statement against activist capture of open source. Also from Lunjuk, Wikipedia banned its own co-founder, and the story is as remarkable as it sounds. Larry Sanger, who co-founded Wikipedia, was blocked indefinitely from editing the site shortly after formally proposing what he called Wikiproject intellectual diversity on June 18th. Here's the sequence. Sanger proposed the Wiki project calling for fair decision-making, giving minority views a fair hearing, genuine neutrality meaning not taking a position on controversial issues, transparent governance, and responsiveness to the public. He was blocked around June 22nd, then reinstated the same day after Jimmy Wales apparently intervened. Later on June 22nd, Sanger received the Sine Award from Tablet magazine at an in-person event in New York City, presented by Walter Kern, who called him a rare figure, a philosopher who acts. Immediately after the award ceremony, Wikipedia editors moved to ban him again, indefinitely. The formal ban notice cited 3 reasons: canvassing, not being present to constructively build the encyclopedia, and calls for outing. Lunjuk focuses heavily on canvassing. Sanjay discussed his proposal on X and on a podcast, advocating for more diverse voices in editing. Talking publicly about wanting to improve Wikipedia was treated as a violation. The administrator who enacted the final indefinite block quoted and endorsed the reasoning of an editor with the handle Chaotic NB, which Lunjuk notes as an LGBT-related identifier. His way of pointing at the ideological composition of Wikipedia's editorial class without belaboring it. Lunjuk's analysis: if you cannot talk publicly about problems you perceive without being banned, there's no mechanism for fixing those problems. He reads Sanjay's own statement in full. Sanjay calls it a kangaroo court run by a mob, criticizes the lack of formal charges, a designated prosecutor, basic decorum, and dispassionate adjudication. He says subscribing to groupthink is now an official requirement of membership in good standing. Lunjuk closes by saying he does not believe Wikipedia can fix itself in its current state, is getting progressively less useful and accurate, and the people running it appear uninterested in improvement. He also promotes his Wikipedia Donation Destroyer Chrome extension, which blocks Wikipedia fundraising pop-ups and replaces them with Wikipedia's actual financial figures. Over $100 million in annual revenue, hundreds of millions in total assets, and a CEO salary of approximately $500,000 per year. Completely shifting gears, if you're thinking about buying a car this summer, CarEdge has a detailed summer 2026 market update worth paying attention to. Two presenters: a younger, data-forward son and his father, a 43-year car sales veteran whose blunt delivery is the more memorable of the two. The new car picture: the average advertised new car price is $51,797, up $2,264 year over year. The father points out the irony that automakers have been publicly talking about affordability while raising prices. Market day supply sits at 76 days. During the pandemic, it was in the 30s. 1 in 5 new car buyers is carrying a monthly payment of $1,000 or more. The father calls this proof positive that new cars are unaffordable to the vast majority of consumers. Interest rates are at 6.9% APR for new car loans, with the Fed not having cut rates. The new Fed chair, Kevin Warsh, has signaled possible rate increases as early as September and October 2026 due to persistent inflation. Brand-by-brand breakdown: the most negotiable brands, highest day supply, are Chrysler, Dodge, Volkswagen, Mitsubishi, Lincoln, Jeep, and Ram. The least negotiable are Lexus and Toyota, who are well below 40 days, with a 4-month waitlist on the RAV4 specifically. Honda and Cadillac are also below average. Where the deals are: over 100,000 unsold 2025 model year vehicles remain on dealer lots, with Ford having a disproportionate share. The 5 brands offering the best combination of value and negotiability are Nissan, Mazda, Kia, Ford, and Hyundai. The first 4 have all increased incentives in the past 2 months, and sales have responded. EVs are also a deal opportunity. Even with higher gas prices, demand remains insufficient, and manufacturers are offering 0% APR on some new EVs with strong lease deals. Overall new car verdict: neutral, Switzerland. Not a buyer's market, not a seller's market. The used car market is where the alarm bells ring. Inventory is at some of the lowest levels seen in 5 years, while average listing prices are approaching pandemic-era highs at nearly $27,000, up $900 year over year. Used car loan rates are approaching 11% APR. Carvana and CarMax are called out specifically. Some low-mileage used vehicles are actually selling above original MSRP. The presenters strongly advise getting the original window sticker for any 1 to 3-year-old used car you're considering. If the used price is at or above original MSRP, buying new makes more financial sense. Used EVs are up nearly 14% year over year, making new EVs with 0% financing an even better relative deal. The average used car has over 70,000 miles on it, and a pre-purchase inspection is described as an absolute necessity. Overall used car verdict: poor to fair, a great time to sell or buy out a lease, a genuinely difficult time to be a buyer. On the EV front, Sam Evans from the Electric Viking covered Ford's new affordable universal EV platform, and the headline detail that's getting people excited is the confirmation of right-hand drive support. Sam is careful. This isn't a launch announcement for Australia or other RHD markets, it's the removal of the engineering barrier. The vehicle is expected to launch in 2027 at a U.S. starting price of $30,000, built at Ford's Louisville assembly plant in Kentucky. Sam converts that to roughly odd $45, $000.46, $000 at current exchange rates before taxes, shipping, compliance, and dealer margins, and is upfront that real Australian retail pricing will likely land closer to odd $55, $000.65, $000. He argues even at that level it would be compelling, since the current Ford Ranger PHEV is priced higher, and Chinese PHEV utes are already proving buyers want electrified trucks at competitive prices. On what the vehicle actually is, some reporting suggests a footprint closer to the smaller Ford Maverick, but with interior cabin space exceeding a Toyota RAV4 thanks to EV platform packaging efficiency. Sam suggests this might be a slightly smaller, smarter vehicle targeting families, fleets, and urban trades, and argues most ute buyers never actually tow near maximum capacity anyway. Technical details confirmed: LFP batteries from CATL, manufactured by Ford in the U.S. Structural battery pack forming part of the vehicle's floor. Acceleration equivalent to a Mustang EcoBoost 0-100 km/h in approximately 5 seconds, faster than any current Ranger including the Raptor. Vehicle-to-home capability for up to 6 days of home power. Frunk, lockable bed, smart storage, over-the-air updates. The manufacturing story is where Sam says the real importance lies. The platform cuts parts by about 20% and fasteners by about 25%. The wiring harness is 1.3 kilometers shorter and 10 kilograms lighter than the Mustang Mach-E's. Ford is using large aluminum unicastings similar to Tesla's gigacasting. He frames this as Ford's attempt to fight Chinese automakers with engineering simplification and cost reduction. Sam cites Ford CEO Jim Farley as having been blunt about the Chinese threat, including visiting Australia and describing it as a preview of what the world will face. Sam lists the Chinese brands already in Australia: BYD, Great Wall, LDV, Chery, MG, Geely, Deepal, Leapmotor, XPeng, and others, as actively targeting Ford's core segments. His final assessment: if Ford brings this to RHD markets, prices it aggressively, and doesn't position it as a premium lifestyle product, it will be a hit. If they delay or price it too high, Chinese competitors will take the market. Sam also ran an interview with First Phosphate's CEO about their phosphate mining project in Quebec. And the story is notable for how much institutional support has materialized before the mine is even built. The company is developing the Bijalamarch mine in the Saguenay-Lac-Saint-Jean region of Quebec. 3 G7 governments, Canada, Italy, and Denmark, are actively backing the project. CEO John Passalacqua says this level of nation-state involvement this early in a mining project's life cycle is unprecedented. The purpose: signal to markets that governments are serious about securing these minerals and de-risk the project so private capital will also commit. The volumes already committed: 200,000 tons of phosphate concentrate per year and 60,000 tons of phosphoric acid per year, some of them prepaid, in place before the feasibility study is even complete. Passalacqua frames the urgency this way: LFP batteries now represent somewhere between 70 and 85% of all batteries produced globally, and virtually all of that supply chain currently runs through China. The West is urgently seeking alternatives, so partners are willing to commit early. On what the government backing actually does, it doesn't necessarily accelerate the timeline, since the company already has capital to reach a final investment decision. What it does is de-risk successive stages: first the mine, then the downstream phosphoric acid plant, then cathode active material production, and eventually the battery cell manufacturers who will use the material. Passalacqua frames this as de-risking the entire LFP battery supply chain for North America and Europe. Sam did push on the question of whether the letters of interest from Denmark and the Italian agency and MAIRE are actual money or just intent. Pasalacqua's answer was relatively high level. Completing the feasibility study and continuing permitting are the key milestones, and all parties are working to fast-track financing in parallel. He didn't give a specific conversion timeline. Sam disclosed upfront that he holds shares in First Phosphate and noted the stock has risen significantly this year, so take the enthusiasm with appropriate context. And finally, from the Electric Viking, Sam took a departure from his usual EV content to cover Solar Foods, a Finnish company making protein powder from electricity and thin air, and he's genuinely captivated by it. He frames the core thesis as an energy efficiency argument. Traditional photosynthesis-based farming is an inefficient solar-to-calorie converter requiring enormous land, water, and months of time. Feeding crops to animals adds another layer of inefficiency. Solar Foods' process, called gas fermentation, bypasses all of this. Use excess renewable electricity to split water into hydrogen and oxygen via electrolysis, combine that hydrogen with CO2 captured directly from the air, and feed it to a naturally occurring microbe in a fermentation tank. The microbe multiplies rapidly, and the resulting biomass is dried into a yellow powder called soline. No fields, no fertilizer, no animals. The nutritional profile is where Sam gets animated, calling it staggering. Soline is 78% pure protein by composition, compared to roughly 25% for chicken, fish, and eggs, approximately 3 times more protein dense. It scores a perfect 1 on the PDCAAS amino acid scale, meaning all 9 essential amino acids are present in adequate proportions, solving the core problem with most plant proteins. 20% of its amino acid content is BCAAs, critical for muscle repair. Bioavailable iron at 110 mg per 100 g, naturally produced vitamin B12, 10% fiber with beta-glucans for blood sugar stabilization. A fat profile similar to olive oil, 0 cholesterol, 0 major allergens, and essentially no sugar. The infrastructure argument. A Soline factory can be placed anywhere on Earth as long as solar panels and water are available. It operates 24/7, 365 days a year, immune to droughts, floods, and supply chain disruptions. Sam draws an explicit parallel to legacy automakers dismissing Tesla and BYD, predicting that large food and agriculture conglomerates are currently ignoring Solar Foods, and that this is a mistake. Solar Foods has opened its first commercial factory in Finland, has regulatory approval in Singapore and the United States, and is pursuing European approval. Sam says he wants to personally order and test the product on camera, predicts it probably tastes terrible, and indicates he doesn't care. One quick one to round things out. A Microsoft developer advocate made a short case for Azure SQL Database as the go-to foundation for building AI applications on Azure. The pitch is about data locality. Your operational data already lives in Azure SQL, and rather than building a separate pipeline to move that data to a standalone vector store, you can build and store vectors directly within the same database using the DiskKNN index, an indexing method that lives inside the same Azure SQL instance alongside the operational data. The integration connects to language models through Microsoft Foundry, which supports both OpenAI and Anthropic models. The use case is RAG-style grounding. When a user chats with a model, the responses are anchored to live operational data rather than just training data. The presenter's phrase was "talk to LLMs with the truth that you have in your operational data." Entry point is a free tier, making it a low-risk starting point for developers evaluating the platform. That's your 25 hours in one sitting. AI paradigm shifts, government bans, open-weight model breakthroughs, hardware launches from Steam to iPad to electric utes, and a Finnish company making protein from electricity. Big day. Biggest ongoing story to watch is clearly the Fable ban and whether that congressional response lands before June 26th.